how does the unicorn myth differ from what is physically possible? Is it reasonable for a living creature to have the traits and abilities of the legendary unicorn? Many creatures today share various traits that we recognize in the unicorn. The seminal rhino, for one, bears quite a striking horn upon its snout, and many antelope and deer have also evolved horns for various defensive and display purposes. When one considers the frequency with which animals are mistaken for the unicorn, it hardly seems far-fetched for the creature to be real. The narwhal, a marine animal, bears a helical tusk that is also very similar to the horn of a unicorn. This creature must be mentioned due to how often its tusk is purported to be a unicorn's horn. Initially, the equine form of a unicorn is quite common amongst mammalian animals. Thus, the general form of a unicorn is not entirely impossible to rationalize, and appears to be a focal point of convergent evolution in mammals. However, the skin of the unicorn is open to question, as it could quite easily be covered in fur, as most horses are, or it could resemble the carcadon, and boast scales instead, assuming an appearance more akin to that of the rhino. The matter of the horn becomes quite biologically complicated. Horn material consists mostly of keratin, with a bone root upon which the horn forms, and, when fully grown, horns are swept back in some way, possibly to deflect incoming energy away from the animal bearing the horn. This is quite different from the manner in which unicorns are then depicted, with forward-facing horns. Ironically, the only time physical protrusions tend to point forward, away from the animal, is when they take the form of a tusk, such as seen in the aforementioned narwhal, as well as elephants or boars. Due to the nature of tusks being an evolutionarily modified tooth, they usually form around the mouth area of the animal, which is again quite dissimilar to depictions of the unicorn. Examining the fossil record, it is difficult to find animals whose horns point forward. Even the famous Triceratops doesn't actually possess horns, as the protrusions from its skull consist of bone with evidence of venous activity, suggesting they were more for display purposes. Thus, we are presently left to conclude that the unicorn horn is either a tusk that points forward from the snout, or is swept back in some way from the top of its head. The final aspect of the myth would see medicinal properties added to the horn, which is quite difficult to explain, as horn material is hardly any different from hair or fingernails. One solution is perhaps present in the inclusion of silver in the diet of the unicorn. Silver, like copper, is known to have antibacterial properties, and an animal that takes advantage of these properties by actively consuming small amounts of silver would find itself less prone to gastrointestinal bacterial infections. And, when considering that colloidal silver is sometimes used for this very purpose, it's easy to see why an animal might crave silver. Hair is considered to be a minor excretory organ, and trace amounts of metals can even be found in human hair. With this in mind, it is not difficult to reason that small amounts of silver would make its way into the hair of the unicorn, and give it not only its silvery sheen, but also a horn that has minor antibacterial properties, in addition to being incredibly valuable. Indeed, the healing properties of bandages made from the tail hair would be hardly any different from that of modern-day plasters, which contain silver nanoparticles for their antibacterial effect. However, this hypothesis is only possible if the unicorn does indeed have a keratin-based horn and produces hair, which negates the possibility of one bearing a tusk. Ultimately, we are left with two possible versions of the unicorn. We can see that the shape and general traits of this creature are not beyond what might be considered reasonably conceivable. And though the magical properties of the horn are quite far-fetched, it is nevertheless quite entertaining to discover that even this aspect might be reasoned into existence. Fanciful inductions aside, the unicorn is nonetheless a beautiful symbol of purity, which inspires the imagination of people the world over to this day.